Hey, learning nerds. Before we begin today's show, I want to give a quick shout out to the sponsor of this podcast, Idle Courses Academy. If you're looking to transition into the corporate instructional design space, you need the right guidance to do so. Dr. Sargent and her team have done an incredible job of focusing on what's important to be a corporate instructional designer, like storyboarding, ID models and theories, authoring tools, project management tactics, and more. They even cover how to make your resume and portfolio stand out from the crowd and have an impressive completion rate with their students working at organizations like Google, Salesforce, GM, Uber, Walmart, and Amazon. Also, you won't be going through this entire learning journey alone. You'll be studying alongside other aspiring instructional designers, as well as working with experienced mentors and coaches. And as an added bonus, you'll get a discount on my ebook, What I Wish I Knew Before Becoming an Instructional Designer. So check out the industry-recognized program that's showing up in job descriptions as preferred training and education by going to idlecourses.com/academy. Enrollment is opening back up again in January, so be sure to use my promo code Luke to save $88 off your enrollment. And now, let's start the show. Hey folks, and welcome on in to the nerdiest podcast that you're going to hear today. My name is Dr. Luke Hobson. I'm a senior instructional designer and program manager at MIT. I'm also the author of the book called What I Wish I Knew Before Becoming an Instructional Designer. And I make a lot of content on the internet about instructional design, a blog, a podcast, and a YouTube channel because of the fact that this is my passion. I love instructional design, and the only thing I love more than instructional design is actually sharing about this journey with all of you and helping you along your own instructional design journeys. Whether you are a newbie and you just heard about instructional design today, or you're a veteran in the field and you've been doing this for years, all are welcomed on in. The only and critical type of an important part is that you have to be a learning nerd. So if you identify as a learning nerd, then hey, this show is absolutely for you. And of course, you can find all my information over at drlukehobson.com. Folks, we have a special episode. This is a legitimate 2 years in the making episode where I've been trying to get this guest to come on the show. There's been a lot of back and forth talk, and then finally, we were able to actually do this. And why I was trying so hard for 2 years to get this guest to come on board is that she is one of my favorite people within the instructional design land, and her name is Dr. Indi Williams. Now, Indi is an instructional designer and program manager over at MIT xPRO. Now, if that name sounds familiar to you, well, it should, because we're actually on the same team together. So this is what's going to be a ton of fun, is that you have two instructional designers at MIT who are going to be answering your questions. Today's entire episode is a Q&A episode where, just like with some of the past ones that we have done, you sent in some of your best types of questions, whether by email at luke@drlukehobson.com or just by Facebook and with LinkedIn. Please feel free to keep on sending in more and more of your questions. One of the questions for today was extremely timely because it was about AI and, oh, hey, this new thing called ChatGPT came out. And yeah, we had a field day with covering that one. So this one is a very timely episode answering your questions. Please feel free to send in more because at this point in time, I actually have multiple guests who are waiting in the wings. Everyone so far who I've talked to has loved this format, and by everyone, I mean you, the audience and the listeners at home, but also other instructional designers who are like, I want to come on the show. I want to do this kind of Q&A feedback episode thing with you. So send in more questions. We'd love to be able to answer them and to tackle them all for you. But folks, I'm not going to waste any more time. Let's get this episode started, shall we? Here is the one and the only Dr. Indi Williams. Indi, welcome to the podcast.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. Me too. And I cannot wait to dive on in today because, Indi, we have some incredible questions that are actually very timely as well, too. So this one is going to be a really just a ton of fun of everything. But before I get ahead of myself, can you just please introduce yourself to the audience? Tell us a little bit more about who you are and what it is that you do.
My name is Dr. Indi Marie Williams, and I am an instructional designer and program manager with MIT xPRO. And so I design technology and technical courses, and we have a lot of fun using all these instructional design skills to really create quality professional education.
Absolutely. And what a good sounding team name in a department. It's
Yes,
just like people
sounds
from
familiar.
xPRO. Probably are smart people. So yes. So fantastic. You're going to get folks at home. You're going to get a lot of MIT xPRO today because Indy and I are on the same team. So we're going to be coming at this from an MIT perspective, which is going to be a lot of nerdy fun.
Oh, yeah.
So let's not waste any time and let's dive on into this, shall we? So we have 4 questions. And for the folks listening, once again, how we did this is that we are taking literally your questions that you sent in over to us from Facebook, from LinkedIn, and of course from email. All of those links are going to be down below inside of the show notes. If you do have a question, please feel free to reach out and we are more than happy to tackle and dive on into here. But today we have 4 of them, and the first one is a doozy. It is just very timely for things. So here we go. This is what question number 1 says. It says, Luke, I'm in a rabbit hole with Myers' cognitive theory of multimedia learning. I'm curious, from your perspective, what do his 15 updated principles mean for instructional designers? Does it change anything? And if so, what's the impact? Also, I'm curious about anything and everything AI right now as it's related to instructional design, both current capability and capability 5 to 10 years out. And my last question, how do you remain so cool? It is a mystery that may never be revealed. Well, first, thank you. Also, I did not write that in there myself, which I'm sure some people are like, wow, did he really write that? I did not write that in there.
I actually wanted the answer to that part of the question first.
No.
How do you stay so cool?
The fact that learning nerds are cool in 2022 is just like a wonderful, beautiful thing. So, hey, fantastic. We'll take it. Learning nerd community is strong. But Indy, this one is crazy. And do you mind if I start tackling this first?
No, go for it.
Okay, because the thing is this for this question, and I have not done this yet with a podcast episode before, I am calling an audible. I want to pivot. Now, the reason why is that there are 2 questions in this one. I very much want to dive on into the second question because for the first question, and this is actually, I wrote back to the listener because I was just like, hey, I got some follow-up questions here, man, because for those of you listening at home, you're probably thinking about, wait, Myers' cognitive theory and multimedia learning, there's 12 principles, but we just said 15. Now, that's the thing. That was actually Indy and I's thinking as well, too. We were chatting before this about, wait a second, like, I really thought there was 12. Everything I go and do in research and remember from reading from school was 12. I was like, what? So there is a new book that came out during the pandemic, and now there is an updated list. There is 15. I did not know that until literally yesterday, where I had to reach back out to this person of like, am I missing something? Is it a typo? Am I like, and it's just like, oh no, Luke, there's a new book. So because of that, I do not feel like I have all the information to be able to actually go and to explain and dive on into this and to give any form of a real answer besides me just making it up and telling you around like past things that have updated from having 7 things to now 10 things you need to know about or whatever. So I'm not going to give you a real answer. So unfortunately, I need some more time to be able to do that. And Indy, it makes me feel better that you face that same thing.
Oh, I do. But I do think it would be fair for us to at least tell the listeners too that the last 3 principles, in case they hadn't heard about them, are the embodiment principle, the immersion principle, and the generative activity principle. They are fantastically interesting to look into. However, again, I really haven't had time to really dive into them. And to be honest, they are very similar to other foundational instructional design theory. And so it would be interesting to tackle that at a later time, but I don't think I'm ready to talk about them tonight.
Right. So putting a pin on this, don't want to go away from it. Sounds interesting, but we need some more time to be able to dive on into that one. But now, this is the one that I've just been, and for anyone following on LinkedIn and Facebook of my journey into this rabbit hole about using what you might have already been reading about online, which is ChatGPT, or the other actual name from the behind the scenes is GPT-3. And what this basically is, if you don't know this yet, is that this is essentially an open AI type of source where you can go and submit a question or a request inside of this open source material, depending upon the parameters, how specific you get, then it actually spits out your answer of whatever you might actually be looking for. Now, for most of these different types of AI products that have come out before, it's always been kind of like, it's never been great. It's always been, that's okay. That was kind of close, maybe, but whatever. This one is different. Everything that I have put into this so far has been relatively really good. Besides, you need to make some few changes here and there, but for the most part, it's been pretty mind-blowing. So I've done this so far with a number of things, but the first, I put in my job history. I wanted to see if it could write a better resume than what I currently have.
Everybody
Pretty
wants
darn
that.
close. It was really good. Or I was like, okay, that's interesting.
Yep.
Then I asked it to be able to write a script for me with a video I was working on. I told it could only be 7 minutes in length. Sure enough, it gave me a script I could possibly read. It's like, okay. Then I asked it to write a sales copy for a new course description that we've been working on. Sure enough, it gave that information. Then I asked it to write a book for me, a learning experience design. I was like, give me an outline for a book with at least like 5 chapters. Sure enough, it spit that thing out too. And that's when I was like, well then, that's interesting.
It's amazing. The actual engine behind it has advanced so much further than the original GPT-3 set for. And for those of you who are not familiar with what GPT-3 is, it's a generative pre-trained transformer 3. And that means there was a 1 and 2, so they were even worse. But what it is, it's an autoregressive language model that uses deep learning, and this is directly from their website, capable of producing text similar to that which is created by a human being. And a lot of what Luke's talking about, because I played around with ChatGPT as well, is that it has evolved so much that it is almost indistinguishable from human writing. And that is the power of this, and also a little... It enters us into a realm of a little bit of fear, because what about those writers or the people whose entire careers are surrounded around writing or words or literature? So can we just plug in a prompt? So when you were working with the prompts, I worked with this as well, but did you find it difficult finding the prompts to put into it, Luke?
No, I found that even if I put in a general prompt at first and the answer was kind of okay, it's a chat bot. So the conversation continues. So you could then actually give it a follow-up command after that. And then that's when I kept on getting more and more granular. And then sure enough, it was able to really get as specific as I wanted, which was this like, okay, this is kind of cool, kind of scary, as you were just alluding to, where I know, and this is actually how I found out about it, was because I was a part of a Facebook group and everyone was just talking about how this thing is going to replace people. And I was like, all right, hold on a second. So it's like, before we go down this world that the Terminator is coming and that we're all going to be out of a job pretty soon, to me, even though it's sophisticated, even though it can do all of these different types of things, at the end of the day, it is still a tool. It all comes down to how you use the tool. And then from an instructional design perspective, because of course, obviously, I had to dabble of like going hard into instructional design to see, could it create outcomes? Could it create objectives? Could it create a story for something like a scenario-based learning assignment? It can, fun fact. But what I was able to go and think about this was more about a stance of, if you were stuck, let's say you were just having a complete and total writer's block, nothing's coming to you for creativity wise. You want to go inside of there and get that type of a spark to see some ideas about something. Beautiful. That to me is what I will probably use that for the most, is that if a word isn't coming to me, or if I'm just super tired at the end of a day and it's just not clicking, I can go into there, get some new ideas, then take that back into the drawing board, do a whole bunch of wordsmithing and brainstorming of colleagues, and then, expand upon that. So that was my take on it. But what about you, Indy? What was your take on that whole idea?
My take, and I'm going to dip into the instructional design issue here. So what does that really mean? Well, like Luke said, it's a tool. But I have to be honest, if I can use the tool to create the instruction, and then use AI voices to read the instruction, and then use other AI generators to create images or even video for the instruction, it leaves that question of what's going to happen to my job. Where in 5 years are these engines, generative or not, are they going to be replacing me? Yes, maybe, or no. I mean, we can't see the future, but it is very important for any instructional designer, including myself, to become not only aware of these tools, but to learn how to use them. And I think that's the big neon sign that I received after playing with it and using it. You can ignore it and hope it goes away, or you can learn it, even learn how to code them and program them, and then align them. Train one to write learning objectives. See if that helps your instructional design practice. Compare your objectives to what the actual GPT-3 or GPT actually creates. I think it's a wonderful opportunity for us to really take the field of instructional design into artificial intelligence networks and neural networks and deep learning, and then have our field evolve using that technology.
That makes sense to me. And I know one of the things too that I kept on reading about was the next article that popped up right after that was something like "The college essay is dead." Something like that was the article title.
Yes.
And then, I talked to a few other colleagues too, who also have like backgrounds in English and writing, who were like wondering about like my take of just like, so, what do you envision for this? And the thing that I know that some people are going to find shocking to hear about this is that plagiarism has been around for forever.
Thank you.
So
thank you for saying that.
So just
Thank
because,
you.
yeah. Just because now there's AI generated content,
Exactly.
it's not changing anything. So
Yeah.
from if we would take it from like, let's say an online learning perspective that is a writing class, and you do have your students submit essays, there already has been Turnitin and other plagiarism detectors that have been around for forever. They're only now going to have to get stronger. They're going to have to definitely become more known, more utilized for sure. I know that some online schools still don't use like a plagiarism detector, and I'm like,
that is a true statement.
what
Not
are you
all
doing?
schools do.
No, I was like, you need that.
You do.
Yeah.
You do.
So that's gonna have to obviously become more prevalent for sure. But it's you can still Google right now an answer to something and copy and paste it. Like, you don't need AI to do that. You can literally just go and Google something. So you can even go and buy a paper on Course Hero. I remember I saw students who would submit papers, and I would see like the same wording from like one term to another term, and I was like, so that's wrong. It's like, it's the same exact paper. So obviously, like, you're smart enough to be able to know that. Having a tool like with Turnitin or something is going to be able to help you, obviously, even more than that. But it's not going to kill creativity. It's definitely going to probably aid more in killing of common sense. That's not great. But, plagiarism has always been there. It's never going to go away. It's just something we need to get better at with recognizing. So
exactly. And to be completely honest, you've always heard it always hurts you more than it hurts someone else. And the truth of the matter is it really does, because at some point, not writing all those term papers or using an AI engine is going to catch up with you. But that doesn't mean it should be banned or it should be removed or it should be hidden. It's here. And it's just going to get stronger. And this is actually the progression we're talking about is 2 and 3 years. What is it going to look like in 5 years?
Yep,
10
that's
years.
true.
So use it as a tool, regard it as a tool, learn as much as you can about it. And if it starts becoming integrated into your practice, find a way that you can be unique. And one thing that these deep learning networks, neural networks cannot do very well is creativity, because I did test it with fiction and it still cannot write fiction.
Oh, sure.
So the creativity is still in the hands of a human being. And the most powerful element of instructional design is the creativity. And as long as you can bring that to the table, and as long as you can bring the people skills to the table, because these neural networks and these deep learning networks and whatever you want to call them or however you want to package them, they still have a difficulty relating to human beings. So if you are strong in those areas, you will never be without a job as an instructional designer.
That makes sense. There's actually research from Dr. George Westerman at MIT, who came up with the human skills matrix back in, I want to say, 2019, right before the pandemic, that basically is focusing on how for AI cannot replicate certain human skills with emotional intelligence, with talking about creativity, that you just mentioned, and things of that nature too. So there's only so many things AI can do. What I also think about too from this, because of course, this is now just on my brain because I've been diving on into this for the last 2 days, but I had a different answer before this that was also talking about AI, but they all kind of link in together. But what it reminds me of too was thinking about with auto grading. Like, auto grading has been around for years. It's not the greatest, but it keeps getting better every single time. And I remember even seeing auto grading for student papers where you could feed in multiple papers, revise the automated generative type of feedback, and then you could just go and make the tweaks and then submit that back into the system and then keep on giving it more and more papers. And eventually, after like 10 to 15 pages of information and 10 to 15 pages of actual submissions, it learned. It learned how to give feedback that not 100% mimicked the professor, but it's pretty close. So that's been there for years. It's only going to get stronger. And the other thing that I would love to actually start using more in the classroom under different types of circumstances to be able to have people recognize kind of like the power of this would be making deep fakes in the classroom. I think it would be crazy to actually go and introduce a type of like of a deep fake professor and then see could students tell at the end and then all of a sudden be like, hey, it was a robot, which then of course also trying to be able to see like, can you identify deep fakes? Because some of them are amazing. You can't tell.
And there are some that are literally impossible to tell if they are deep fakes. And again, that brings in that element of this is a little scary. But all new technology is scary. That's why we have early adopters, mid adopters, and late adopters. So again, I love the idea of using deep fakes because the more you unravel a technology, the less frightening it is. And then you find more uses that are effective within your field, because it's not just going to be effective in instructional design, but it's also effective in all of education and all the various aspects of that. So I look at these as opportunities, but to use with caution.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Well, I think we hit that one home.
I think we did.
I think it was answered out for 20 minutes. So let's move on to question 2. So for question 2, it says, Luke, what tactics and methods do you use to keep learners engaged when the content is dry, stigmatized, or compulsory? Think anti-harassment definitions. The learning is specifically going to be in person, but the group is too large for activities to be feasible. Thank you. Indy, I have thoughts and feelings, but would you like to tackle this one first since I just tackled the other one?
I would love to, because with large groups, I've always found it incredibly effective to take the training and make it introspective. So you cannot ask questions to the group, or maybe it's too overwhelming to do that. Have them journal, have them write their notes, have them look at the content from a personal perspective, walk in someone else's shoes. That not only makes it more relevant to them, but it makes it more personal. And whenever you can make content, no matter who it is, more personal, it is more effective in the long run. Another couple of techniques that I thought about that I had used, but just never really thought about, they became automatic, is how do you feel about the content? So let's say I'm training something and it is dull and it is boring and it is overwhelming and I really don't want to train it. Well, they're really not going to want to be there. So one technique that may seem a little unusual, really sit down for a minute and find out how you feel about that content. And if you bring that energy or you bring that power to it, they will follow you. So if they know that you don't like it and you know that they don't like it and they know that you don't like it, you see where I'm going. So what can you change in your attitude or your perspective about the content to make it more interesting? If you want more tactile ways, everybody has a cell phone. You can always run a back channel. Have them submit questions, using Twitter or using some other back channel, and then every so often answer those questions. So it gives them that feeling that they are a part of the training and that they are forming the questions. In other words, have a plan, work your plan, but be willing to adjust based on the questions. Do a deep dive in something that someone asks a really good question. You're going to cover it in 3 units, but now is a good time to cover it. Change it up a little bit, especially if it's the same training that you've given the same way over and over and over again. And I think if you bring that energy and you bring that passion, even though it may be a passionless topic, that will make a difference in the training. And then ask the participants to set goals before they start the training, and then to discuss whether or not they met those goals after the training. Yes, we ask them what they like. We ask them what they learned. But what did they accomplish the goals that they planned on? And if not, why? And then you can use that to adjust the training later. So those are some of the things that I always think about. I love the introspective aspect, especially looking at myself, because if I am bored, you're going to be bored. It doesn't matter what I'm training. It could be the most exciting topic in the world. But if I come into it with this, oh, I really don't want to be here, but you guys all have to be here and it's required, maybe everybody can be a little introspective, and that would just make it a lot more exciting. That's some of the techniques that I use with large groups.
I love it. So we did not compare answers beforehand, but that's amazing, because the first thing that I wrote down was, how big of a transformation are you looking for?
Yes.
Because it's like what you said, where if I'm going into something where I'm like, here we go again, like time to do this other super boring training kind of thing, it's just not going to have that for that feeling, and it's going to 100% carry over to your learners, your employees, your students, whatever, and they're going to be in the exact same kind of thing. So the good news, as Indy was just describing some awesome methods, but the other thing that I was thinking about too is that there have been other different types of dry content, if you will, that have really come alive and have been very interesting to see about where it's taken people. So I can give you a couple of different types of examples. So one of them was actually from the MIT virtual lab, and it created a type of a simulation that talked about with workplace bullying. And what it did is that you were just actually in the shoes of somebody who's responding to their emails, but the emails that were coming in was from another coworker bullying another coworker. And then you had to pick and choose from 4 responses about how you're going to respond back to that email. And then every time that you responded back to it, it created another email. It didn't go away. So it kept on generating more and more problems. And it was almost like a choose your own adventure type of a game, if you will, but it was upon like real life events. And depending upon what you said, it would make a huge impact. But it was just so weird because it mimics Outlook. It looked like your inbox. So you're like, awesome. This feels real, that, John is making fun of Chris and like, what do I do kind of thing. It was a very odd type of a feeling, but it really hit home because it made you think about, I don't want to, I need to be careful about my answer here. I can't just ignore this. I need to give it some thought. But then also from a couple of different studies that came out that was using virtual reality and then leading into conversations, there were some incredible changes too. One of them was actually a study that was done in Spain using virtual reality, using Oculus, where they brought in people who are rehabilitating, who were domestic abusers, and they put them into the situation where then they had to actually go through and listen and watch in this Oculus, where the other person, this virtual avatar, was actually being the aggressor. And what they found is that for a majority of these males who were the domestic abusers, they backed down because they're like, whoa, no one's ever talked to me like that kind of thing. Like they were very uncomfortable. And it's just like, well, welcome to the situations that you have created. Like this is what other people have gone through. So they showed this level of empathy. And there is this carryover of empathy too from another study that came from Stanford that was asking people about almost a before and after about how they felt with the homelessness crisis. And for a lot of people who came in at first, they're like, it's fine. We can just deal with it, whatever. It wasn't a big deal to them. Sure enough, they went through the virtual reality training where they experienced what it was like to get fired and then to lose your job and come back to your apartment. There's the eviction notice. What are you going to do? And at the end, sure enough, they have more empathy in saying, oh, wow, this could happen to me. I need to figure out what to do. So the topics, going back to the question about like having dry topics, talking about things pertaining to like either homelessness problems or talking about from abuse or from harassment, whatever, things that definitely you're like, what do I do here? I need some type of creativity. And I found those were kind of the Kickstarter to then be able to have a much bigger conversation of just, this is going to be a transformation conversation. You're not just taking this training to then say, hey, I did a training, check mark, go on my way. This was, no, we're going to talk about this. Like, this has evoked emotions and feelings from people. And then the other thing too is just thinking about, and I know this sounds like an odd question because of course we're designers, we're the trainers, we're the leaders, we're the whatever, but then be ready to facilitate and guide that conversation. Because if you get some powerful emotions from people and they really start to pour and want to have a conversation and talk more about things, you need to be ready to ready to handle that. And if you weren't prepared for that one, it's going to be like a mind blowing type of a thing. So those are some of the things that I've seen that were interesting types of approaches to taking some of those more types of conversations.
I think those are great approaches. I love them.
Yeah.
I love them.
Yeah.
Especially like the simulation when I actually did a homeless simulation once, in which basically no matter what choice you made, you became further and further in poverty, closer to being evicted. And then by the end of the game, no matter what choice you made, you were always evicted. And you had a child and you had to go through that. And it was that empathy, as you described, that fundamentally made a difference with me saying, that won't ever happen to me, to being able to walk in that person's shoes. And that is what makes those type of experiences real. And even with a large group, you can find some small way of integrating that. And it's amazing the transformation in a group who hated the training last year and love it this year. So all of these techniques, I think, are worth at least seeing whether or not you could put a little piece of it in the training or in that workshop or whatever it is that you happen to be teaching. So, because they're all very effective.
Absolutely. Well, and also we're going to put all the links in the show notes, by the way, folks, as we've been giving example after example. So there will be lots of reading if you would like to read more and to learn more. That will be in there for you. Any other thoughts on this question, or you think we're good for this one?
No, I think we're good for this one.
All right, cool. Let's dive on into question number 3. And this one says, hi, I am more and more interested in an instructional design leadership track. Do you have any suggested reading or referrals for this, specifically for instructional designers looking to move into an instructional design manager role at some point, or educational manager, leader, etc.? I'm wondering what hiring managers look for in instructional designers' careers and resumes in terms of length of time with their employer. Does having a variety of experience appeal, or is loyalty to a company or to a particular industry better? I'm sure this has a lot to do with the instructional designer wants out of a career, but I'm trying to look at it from the other way around, which is extremely smart. My organization has no option for me to move upward into management as the leadership positions above me require a master's in nursing to apply. Thank you in advance. So, would you like me to start this one as you started the last one? Let's keep going back and forth.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so this one is extremely interesting one, as also somebody who was trying very hard to work his way up from an instructional designer to a senior instructional designer. I had definitely been where you are before, so I can give you a brain dump about some suggestions and things to do. But the first thing, I did not want to overlook this comment, because depending upon, I don't know where you work or your background. I'm assuming because you said nursing that I'm assuming with something for like medical hospital related is my best guess. I would hope so. But the thing that I want to actually ask you about first is, can you first apply to the job and then get the master's afterwards by using either professional development funding or with tuition assistance? Now, nursing I know is very specific, and maybe there's a law requirement to something that says, no, you must do X before Y, which I understand. But also, I have seen many colleagues and peers within higher education who have gone for roles. They got the job as far as for being a dean or something, very high inside of the organization. And as soon as they got the position, their superiors were like, "Great, you're going back to school." And it was like an immediate, you don't have a choice. Like, you have to get a higher graduate level type of a degree. So is that an option? Have you explored that? Have you actually asked? Have you asked if there are any types of circumstances where you can work around this kind of thing? Like, that would be kind of my first thing, just to be able to understand. Not the end of the world if we have to work around this, but if that's one barrier that we can just simply remove by asking a question to HR, the hiring manager, whoever, and all of a sudden you find out that there's another way, and it's going to save you a lot of time, energy, and effort if we can figure this out. So that's kind of step one. So now let's go on to step two. Just maybe that, this is going to be a thing. What do we do? So thinking about it from a senior instructional designer standpoint is really different compared to being an instructional designer. What I've found the most is that I am not in the weeds anymore. So I am not diving on into the content, into the curriculum. I am not actually going through and creating the course outcomes or the objectives or going through with the content or actually making the assignments or whatnot. Now it's more of I am overseeing the development of those things. So I would say it comes down to managing projects and then leading people. That is what a senior instructional designer actually does. So in order for you to make your case, let's say, about why you should become a senior instructional designer at potentially your employer or for another employer, I want you to write down all of the accomplishments and all of the amazing projects that you have done so far, because it is so easy to forget, move on, and then to keep on going from there. And then all of a sudden you have a conversation with someone and they're like, "Didn't you just build and launch that brand new product last year? Didn't you host this massive training that 300 people took? Didn't you do this pilot program?" And you're like, "Oh yeah, I did do that thing. It's gone because I'm moving on to the next project." So definitely write everything down from all your accomplishments, then thinking more about volunteering and mentoring anyone else within the organization. If there are junior instructional designers, junior members of the team, trying to show that leadership initiative is definitely going to help, as well as too is being able to lead trainings for other higher level people. So in my case, thinking about it more from faculty, staff, and other folks is one thing. For your case, working at a hospital, maybe for nurses, doctors, administration, whoever, I'm not sure who's actually going to fit the bill for what it is that you're doing, but leading those trainings for other people and showing that cross collaboration from different departments and trying to be able to do that to get your name out there is really only going to help. And then at the end of all of that, then you can actually pitch out your case about why you deserve to be able to have a better title, promotion, a raise. Because of course, now at this point in time too, you're able to learn more, to network more, to see more different types of processes that could be improved upon, see some pitfalls that perhaps potentially you can fix. You can take on more initiatives, you can do way more. And then that, that you're on track, where unfortunately you're doing a ton of stuff that doesn't fall into your radar, where all of a sudden you're like, I have all these new responsibilities and I'm leading this and I'm doing this. And you're like, I'm not getting paid more for doing all these things, but it's getting there. You can see the light at the end of a tunnel, because then when you go and talk with your supervisor afterwards, you're like, look at all these things that I did. Here's all this amazing, awesome stuff. And if they still say, no, you need this nursing degree, you're like, okay, well, now I'm going to go to another organization and say, look at all these amazing things I did. So no matter what, you're building out your portfolio, your resume, you're building out all these different types of new opportunities that you're able to talk about inside of the interviews as you go through that process. And that's going to really help you to become a senior, a senior instructional designer compared to just an instructional designer. And I know that was really long. Indy, that makes sense as you're listening to me.
No, it made perfect sense from the perspective of an instructional designer who is not a senior instructional designer. It makes perfect sense. And actually, believe it or not, I have a research article that backs up everything that you just said.
Oh, hey, that's nice.
So yes, that works out really well. So in the online journal of Distance Learning Administration, there is an article that I happened to find. It was in spring 2020, volume 23, issue 1, Instructional Design Leadership and Management Competencies Job Description Analysis. So what the authors did was they went and looked at the major organizations that hired instructional designers and looked for positions that were listed as leadership positions. And they did the Higher Ed Jobs, Chronicle of Higher Education, Indeed, Educase, and the Association of Educational Communication and Technologies. So from there, they found 30 articles that had leadership, and they did a textual analysis, qualitative analysis, going through and looking at the different themes. And what they discovered completely aligns with what you said. The top areas that leaders in instructional design, what these job postings were looking for, could be grouped under communication, being able basically to communicate with people, which is essential. Instructional design, so having that skill. General leadership and management, and technical skills. There were other skills I found out, and the article is very detailed. It even gives quotes from various articles of what they were talking about experience in the area of experience. And I noticed the question talks specifically about experience. That's really going to vary, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But in particular, doing the networking that Luke talked about, doing the instructional design, and the other things outside of instructional design. But importantly, showing that you can lead and manage people. That is just essential for any higher level or leadership position in instructional design. And of course, the technical skills, and we touched upon that earlier when we were talking about AI. Be abreast of the field, the theories, that's wonderful. But know the technologies that are being used to make instructional design easier, faster, and more economical. Those are things that they will look for in leaders and in individuals who are looking for those leadership positions, because they will be working closely with administration. And so when you make that jump and you make that step, you're really going to be able to need to know how to communicate with people above you and below you. And as instructional designers, sometimes we really just don't talk to administration as much. Get the experience, sit down, see if you can get invited to meetings, have those, walk in the room and be the person that sits in the corner and just listens. Find out what the vibe is, find out what is going on in the organization that you could make a difference from an instructional design perspective. And all of those things will be valuable. And that all aligned exactly with what you were saying about leadership and networking and things like that. The last thing I wanted to mention that was not only in this article, but it really has to do with the fact that Luke was talking about how you can look to see whether or not you could negotiate or find a way to gain the qualifications. Will they pay for it? Will they sponsor you to go to school, etc.? Also ask yourself, do I have to stay in this area? Because instructional designers are so numerous. You can go into private practice if you want. You can work for a company. You can work for an educational institution. Is it the location that you like? Is it the working in medical field that you enjoy? Find out what it is that you enjoy, and then see if there are any similar areas that don't have the qualifications or the need to have higher education. But I will note, I also want to, speaking about higher education, in this article, out of the 30 articles, 18 of them required a master's degree. So that higher education, you may find it everywhere. But find out if that is really where you want to stay. And if not, if you are willing to take a leap or take a jump or even take a chance, see if there's another area in which you could do instructional design and be very comfortable in that area that may not be in nursing or may not be working in the medical field or in the area that you are. So based on the research and just my own personal experience of asking those questions and then taking that chance, I think that with Luke's network, I love the way you talked about the networking. I love the way you talked about taking on the more responsibilities and having those difficult conversations or those uncomfortable conversations with people you may not be comfortable with, mentoring, all of that together. I think that will definitely help you transition into what you want to do.
And you touched upon something that I didn't say, so thank you for saying it too, was how you communicate with different people above you and below you.
Yes.
That's so different. It's so different to try to flip that switch to figure out how do I communicate with this person effectively as opposed to whoever. And I can give you an example too, which happened to me recently as far as for speaking with, I went from this happened back to back, which was like mind blowing, that giving a presentation to a group of PhD instructional design students. I was in this meeting. So of course my learning nerd flag was flying. I was saying every acronym, going into every learning technique. Like, I was just going for it because these people can talk shop with me. They know what I'm kind of talking about. And then I had a conversation with someone directly afterwards. And the question was, why do people use videos in courses? And I was like, because I was just like, I had to stop. And I was like, okay, like, how do I answer this without being like, so anyway, it made me think to a second where it's just like, okay, it's literally an honest question. Answer that in an appropriate way and not just go right into like, have you never used YouTube ever for anything ever? Has there never been a video that has helped you in any way, shape, or form? It was this completely discounting a form of media entirely. I'm like, videos are like blah. We just use books. I'm like, okay, well, okay. But anyway, so communication of different people, different levels, and knowing how to temper those expectations and how to word things correctly 100% is going to help you with trying to sell idea to somebody who is much higher than you but doesn't need the nitty-gritty instructional design facts, as opposed to somebody else who does need that. They need the tiny details. They need to be in the weeds, and you have to go and introduce that content more because they don't care about the financial implications. They just care about how are we going to finish module 1 on time.
Exactly.
Very different conversations. So
very different. And just to reinforce what you're saying, it's that question about video. He actually had the courage to ask it. He or she, I don't know who actually asked it. A lot of people don't know. Okay, when you're in a field, you think everybody knows what you know. And we forget that you're in a room full of people with all different backgrounds and all different experiences. There is research to back up why we use video in courses. But the first thing I think when I get a question like that is, why are you asking me that question? Because I'm thinking everyone knows the same. That is the power of being able to communicate at different levels. Because when you move up into, and Luke, you know this more than anyone, when you move up into that senior instructional design role, you not only deal with, in your case, administration, faculty, and then other instructional designers, you also deal with students. So they're not going to be abreast of the most recent theories. They may want to know, why am I watching this video when I can read a book? So it is imperative that you are able to communicate those things at different levels to different people, and be able to explain the why. Because I will tell you, when you give a price tag to a course to someone in administration, they're going to look at the price tag and then wonder why you're using this technique. Why
Absolutely.
are you using it? Because
Absolutely.
because we've always done it?
Yeah.
Be able to justify it with that research. And that is the power of just really taking that look and saying, who do I want to have these conversations with? You may want to have those conversations with people in a completely different area. And this is your opportunity to really branch out and see where it is that you would like to take your next step. So there's a world out there. You can go anywhere you want, and you can do instructional design because it's needed everywhere. And so it's just so many opportunities. So
I love it. I love it. The last thing I'll mention, because they did ask about books with leadership, so I'll give you 2, just in case even though all that information is going to be more helpful for you in real time things, but in case you're like, but no, folks, I want a book. Like, okay, understand. I'll give you 2. I'll give you one that's Audible in case if you're walking, you're listening to podcasts on the go. HBR has a book on Audible called HBR Manager's Handbook, the 17 Skills Leaders Need to Stand Out. I'm currently listening to that one. Would definitely recommend for you to do the same. Also, for an educational leadership book that I read as I'm looking at my ground trying to find it, during my doctoral program that I loved because it gave me so by so many different types of frameworks and real life examples about using leadership within an educational context that was really helpful for me to kind of understand my move and transition over into this type of space was the Josie Bass reader on educational leadership by Grogan and Fullen. It's a huge book, massively thick book. So you'll know it when you see it. It's like, oh yeah, it's like 500 pages. Like, yeah, it is. But luckily, you could just pick one chapter and say, like, I want to learn about that framework. It's not like it's not a sequence. You need to read something in chronological order kind of thing. Pick and choose your own adventure there. But highly recommend that one. So those are the two books. And of course, the article, Indy, that you just mentioned, I will 100% link down below because that sounds like that will help out this person too.
Yes.
So there we go. Okay, question 4. And it says, if my voice holds out long enough, I've been talking a lot today. So question 4, it says, hello, Dr. Luke. I am wondering if you could please provide some tips on what to prepare for an interview for an instructional design role in a university. I got a job interview next week, and I am looking for your insight. Thank you very much. I would highly appreciate your reply. So I did already actually reply to this person because it was a timely question.
Right.
So
I was concerned about that.
The answer was delivered to this person. I will now follow up, though, obviously, with more details and information. Did you want me to tackle this? Is it my turn? Is it your turn?
It's mine, but I do want you to tackle it since you've kind of already touched on it.
No, it's your turn.
Oh.
No, we're not. No. We're not going out of turn here, Indy. It's not how we do things. It's your turn.
It's not how we're doing this today. Okay, so I always warn people before I start talking about interviews. My master's degree is in communication studies, and I taught speech. So I always bring that experience into talking about interviews. But I follow a pattern when I have interviews, no matter what it's for. Sometimes I do interviews for practice, which I do advise that people do. Just find something that you're interested in, get an interview, even if it's informal, and just practice that skill because you never know if you need it. But I suggest you find your favorite instructional design model or theory and be able to justify why it is your favorite. That's where I would start. And the reason being is because it is amazing how difficult it is to explain an instructional design model years later after you've studied it. Like, for example, I actually tried it. I did this experiment. I named 3. So my favorite is Addy, and then Kirkpatrick, and then Gagne. Those are my 3. I love them. A lot of people love other ones. But if someone asks me, why do I like Addy as opposed to something else, I would have to say because I love the element of freedom that Addy gives me to use my creativity in the instructional design process. And I could justify that with the different steps of analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. And I could walk through each step. It covers all of the steps of the instructional design process, and I could speak to all of them. That's where I would start. And it doesn't have to take a lot of time, but it really does challenge you to be able to vocalize why you like instructional design and why you're good at it. And explaining that shows and demonstrates to whoever you're interviewing with that you can explain instructional concepts to anyone. So it's kind of like you have all of these wonderful assets that you put in this basket by just studying one theory and being able to explain it. So that's where I always start. I also have kind of like an approach to an interview question. So, Luke, if you were asking me an interview question, I would listen carefully, possibly take notes if I felt that I needed to. Jot down a couple of points that I wanted to say. So after I hear the question, I pause. Get used to the silence because the way an interview is designed is it is designed so that you talk too much. You are supposed to talk too much so that they can find out more about you than you want to reveal. The way you control that, especially with a person like myself, and I love to talk, is I control my answers by controlling my silence. So I listen to the question, take a couple of notes, take a deep breath, then I answer the question, and I stop talking. So you make sure that you answer the question that was asked and stop talking. And normally, they're waiting for more, and they'll ask a second question. That's when you know you can continue talking. That's just how I approach it. And then after that, I try to make sure those answers are very concise and very clear, and I endure the silence because I have to go into this process knowing that I am comfortable with who I am. I'm comfortable with my capabilities and my skills. And in this room, I'm going to show you why I'm the best candidate for this job. So those are just from a communication perspective for some of the things I do, and from an instructional design perspective, some of the things I do to prepare for the interview. And so see if that works.
I love it. I love it. And I actually answered this question a little bit differently too. Okay. So they're getting a full perspective about everything, which is awesome. So the way that I think about instructional design interviews comes down into 3 different types of classifications of questions, if you want to be able to say it that way. So I do already have like an entire video on YouTube about like preparing for instructional design interviews, which I'll put in the show notes somewhere. But this is more about just giving you like a general overview. With the first one is talking about more about you as the individual, because that question will always come up of like, why are you looking to transition? How do you work best with doing blah, blah, blah? What are your superpowers? Like, it's more about you as the individual person, kind of about like, why are you here? Why do you want to be a part of this kind of thing? Which it always is like coming up for conversational piece for that one. Then from there, thinking more about the actual learning nerd side. So what you were talking about with Addie and Gagne and everything like that, where of course for me, I'm using backward design. Right. I've dabbled in Agile. I've done, whatever. But I definitely want to know more. If I was interviewing this person for an instructional design position, I definitely want to hear more about their learning strategies and learning techniques too, because that's one thing that I've noticed from how I actually design a bunch of my projects and courses and programs is that I use certain types of learning strategies and techniques more than others. So I do use project-based learning more. I do use simulations. I do use scenario-based learning. Like, I go into that style, and if you say any of those magical words of like, oh yeah, I've done a whole bunch with universal design for learning, I can definitely take the course and flip it into whatever. It's just like, wonderful. I'm glad we can start talking shop, and I don't have to try to like gauge that level of like, where are we kind of thing. Also based around learning, then we're going to be talking more about SMEs, just huge subject matter experts. I need to know how you work with other people, especially if you are going to be like the face of the institution working with a SME. That is so crucial. And of course, learning more about like your projects and the lessons that you took away from them, your evaluation process. Really curious about that type of a wrap-up reflection inside of there. And then the third classification is in talking more about basically being on a team. So talking about decisions, group-based decisions, collaboration. How do you handle conflict? How do you manage that? What type of atmosphere do you like to work in? What type of pace do you work in as? Like, those are the things I want to know more about. So it's individual, it's going to be learning nerd stuff, and then it's going to be team stuff. That's kind of the 3 things. So that's usually, I've noticed too, that when I wrote down a sample of all these typical interview questions I will ask if we're hiring somebody. And I noticed now it's just like, they all fit into one bucket. Some way, shape, or form, all those questions kind of fit in about, walk me through a key decision on one of your projects. What was the cause and effect of that decision? How do you evaluate your work? If you can go back and revise one past project, what would you do and why? How do you make your courses engaging? Walk me through the design process, share with me details about how you designed a course, a program, or a training. What are you most proud of? A whole bunch of just questions I just threw at you that could 100% hypothetically be on an instructional design interview or a panel or a group or however it is, individual or panel style. But that is kind of how I would prepare, would be to think about those questions ahead of time. Write them down, as you mentioned, Indy. Practice, communicate effectively. I would, if depending upon how serious you are too, I would go above and beyond and actually record how you give the answers, like on Zoom, just to see about how you actually respond with your body language and eye contact. And then if you, like, are you doing like what I'm doing right now, where like I'm moving my hands every 3 seconds? It's very distracting. Shouldn't be doing that in a YouTube video, but that is unfortunately how I talk. So it's something I would need to work on from that stance. But those types of things you can then make notes about. You can practice again. You can try to see if you can improve it the next time again, until eventually you're like, all right, I got it. Like, this is the very best I can do. Let me give this a shot.
Exactly. And I also, it's really kind of funny. I think about everything you listed, but I am so focused on having that conversation because instructional design interviews that I've been in, they want to know how I talk to people.
Right.
They want to know how I communicate. And so everything you listed is perfect. And I've done it at some level, but it's so funny. But when people talk to me about interviews, 9 times out of 10, they are concerned about how they communicate. And it's just interesting to hear how you look at the details and how I was completely focused. I usually focus on the conversation because I've noticed when you relax, all that stuff, all that studying you suggested people do and writing things down and learning, it comes out. But if you're nervous and you're, anxious or, like you said, moving your hands, which I do as well, you are not going to come out. And really the truth of the matter is they're hiring you. And no matter what job you go into, you are going to have to learn that organization. So I believe in taking both of these approaches. I would literally do both of them because definitely writing down everything, but also find that moment in which you know that you are good enough for this and have that conversation because what you know won't do you any good if you can't get it out. That's true. The speech teacher and me talking.
Hey, love it. Love it. And then the other thing which is important that I just want to make sure that I didn't forget as well too is the fact that, remember, you were also interviewing them. Like
that is so
true. They don't hold all the power. Like, yes, you obviously want to get a job that you're going to care about and blah, blah, blah. Totally. But at the same time too, you need to know, is it a right fit for you? It's not just about them saying like, are you a right fit for it? No. Like, are you good for me? Like, are we going to work well together, or is this actually like, no, I think I'm good. We should kind of like part ways, because that is a completely appropriate response where if, let's hypothetically speaking, let's say you make it into the second round, you give it some thought and you're like, you know what? Thank you so much for the opportunity, but actually I think I'm going to pass. I have another thing, but I think I'm going to be more aligned for, but would really appreciate staying connected in the future. That's completely okay to do.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Which is if you get to that level, of course, that is a wonderful thing by all means, because I know that many people right now are unfortunately just applying for anything. Yes. Like they're shooting for anything. And it's just like, you really need to be more precise. I get it. I understand why you're applying for everything. But once you figure out exactly what you love, it's going to come across in that interview too, talking about what you were just saying with communication.
Yes.
If you're applying for a job and you're interviewing for something that you just don't want and you're like, oh, a job's a job, I'm here. Like, it's going to come across that way. Like, much like the other question talking about the training. If you're not passionate about the training topic, they're going to know. The interviewers will know.
It's obvious because, I love instructional design. But I also love working with people and instructional design. It's kind of like my candy and my cake. That's the way I look at it. But as you were talking about, you were interviewing them, I always stress, and I almost forgot until you mentioned that, always have a question to ask them.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Walk in there, listen for a minute, and formulate a question. So when they ask that question, and they should always ask, do you have any questions for us? Do not let that interview end until you ask that question, because that question says more about you than you realize. It shows, so I was listening, there's some concerns that I have, or I just want to know something else. And I usually come up with 2. And one of them is, I just want to know a little bit more about X. And the second one is, I just want a clarification about the actual job. How people view those, I've had mixed results about how people see, listen to both of those questions, but I've never had anyone not answer them. Ask the question. Ask at least one question. And that actually will that'll make it memorable, because we always remember the first thing someone tells us and the last thing someone tells us. And if the last thing you told them was that question, and it's a good one, so use that opportunity.
The one question that I like to hear, because I want people to ask because they're curious about knowing, which is a good thing, is that they want to know if this is a new position because the organization is growing, or if you're backfilling.
Wow.
And you're like, that's a good question. You want to know that. Are we in there? Are we going in the right direction, or did we have something bad and we're trying to fix the problem? It's a good question to ask right from the get-go. One question that I asked, and I did not take the position where I was just like, this is not going to go well, was that I asked about how much of the influence in the decision-making process does the instructional design team have at
Wow.
the institution? Yeah, because talking with them, I was getting that vibe where it was just like, I feel like you potentially have no power and that you're kind of getting like walked over kind of thing. So I was just, it got to my point of like my turn to ask the questions, and I asked that. And I knew instantly, and I think I mentioned this on a long time podcast episode ago, but when I asked that question, one of the people like actually like snorted, like she laughed, and she laughed so hard, being like, she couldn't hide it. And I was like, there's my sign. Well, thank you very much. I'm good. I'm not ready for this. So
that is the wrong. Oh, and that I'm glad you brought that up, because if you get any vibes in an interview, go the opposite direction. There is always another job for you, because there is nothing worse than being a bad fit with them or them being a bad fit in your life. And I'm glad that you talked about a realistic situation in which you had a choice, because there are some, I have been on interviews in which I knew from the first few minutes, that's okay. And a lot of people are like, no, you shouldn't. It's okay. Follow your gut. Follow that gut instinct. And that's why listening to the questions they ask you and looking at their responses to your questions. By the way, people are like, oh, well, you're interviewing and they never show responses. Yes, they do. Listen to responses. Look at body language. I had an interview with someone one time, and she turned her body away from me and asked the questions and didn't look at me. There were 4 people in the room, and she literally turned to the side. It was pretty clear she did not want that. Nope. That wasn't a good fit.
Nope.
For whatever reason. So those are just so important. Yes, know your instructional design. Yes, be able to answer all of the questions that Luke outlined. They're excellent questions. They're very important. Yes, be able to articulate instructional design theories, because as you're going over those theories, you'll realize how much you are answering those other questions that Luke talked about, because you'll go over them. Practice. Be comfortable. Relax before you try not to schedule an interview when you're running in there at the last minute, because you're always going to be anxious. All of those things are good, but you are there to interview them, like Luke said, just like, they're there to interview you, and take that seriously, because this could be 10, 15, 20 years of your life. It could be. You just don't know.
You never know.
And so anything is possible, but if there is a gut feeling, run it by a good friend. Just say, this is what happened in my interview. And you will be amazed that when I told someone about the interview I just described, they were like, yeah, that probably wasn't a good place. Needless to say, I did not get offered the job. So
shocking. Shocking to, nor would you have taken it. That is a clear sign of
it was amazing. Good. And I don't think she realized that she had done it, but everyone else in the room did. And they were trying to pretend it didn't happen.
Oh.
So yes, we are, it may seem like a tangent, but all of this feeds into each other. Interview processes are stressful. They're designed to be that way. You have to turn the tables, and being prepared and being comfortable in your own skin is the most powerful weapon you have to address any of the fear and anxiety you hit with an interview. So I stress that to anybody I speak with. So.
Awesome. Well, let's end it there, because if not, we could literally talk about this for 3 hours.
We could.
I have so many more things I want to share, and I was like, no, this is going to be the longest podcast in the history of the podcast. So we can stop it right there.
Yes.
Well, Indi, thank you so much for coming on this podcast, sharing your wisdom with us. It was wonderful to hear about your perspectives, and of course, everything talking about with the communication and the background. That's fantastic to be able to learn more and to listen from you. For the folks at home who want to be able to follow you, Indi, where can they go to learn more about you and all the good stuff that you're sharing?
Well, they can go to LinkedIn. I am on LinkedIn, and I have updates about what I'm doing and the projects that I'm working on there. And that's probably the best place to get in touch with me.
Sounds great. I will put that link in the show notes for
Perfect.
folks. But once again, Indi, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate
Thank you for
it.
inviting me. I really have enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Indi, once again, thank you so much for coming on the show. And for the folks at home, I would highly recommend for you to connect with Indi over on LinkedIn. You can find her profile either inside of the show notes, or if you're watching this on YouTube, you can just go down below into the video description and connect with her over there. Also, Indi and I mentioned a ton of different resources and links. Once again, they're all down below. And of course, you can go and find all of those things down there. And if you actually like the formatting of this style of interview of the Q&A, once again, send us your questions. Luke at drlukehompson.com, Facebook, LinkedIn, Carrier Pigeon, whatever. Send me over your questions and I will be sure to tackle them by bringing on more incredible, awesome guests who have a ton of expertise. And together we can share our perspectives and be able to help you along your own instructional design journey or whatever type of challenge that you might be facing. Also, some of you have asked me too about what type of interview platform have I been using, because if you've been on YouTube lately, you've seen that I've kind of been changing things up a bit. I've been trying some new stuff, been experimenting with a few things. I am currently using a product that is called Riverside. Riverside has been how I've been able to actually take everything as far as for having these types of split screen views, as well as too from the back end side of the house. If you ever need to be able to do an interview, I would highly recommend to actually do this. It's very easy to use. It does work specifically for Google Chrome, which is one thing I've had to learn to get used to because I'm kind of a Safari guy, but that's really been my only thing. But other than that, it can split the tracks. You can edit everything. You have a chat feature. You can do video or audio, whatever. So Riverside, highly recommend for you to be able to use that one as well. And once again, you can go down below into the links and you can actually find my affiliate link. And if you do go through with that one, that only supports this channel and helps to keep our lights on. So I thank you in advance if you start using Riverside for your own instructional design interviews. But folks, that's all I have for you today. Be sure to subscribe, like, share this episode with a friend who is ever going through any type of instructional design challenge or journey of their own, because of course, the more we share, the more that the word gets out about all these different things, and that's just going to help out a whole bunch of other people. But that is all I have for you today. Stay nerdy out there. I'll talk to you next time.